Hi, I'm CJ North, and I'm an indie author from Alaska. If you like romance stories with darker themes and something nerdy, then you might like my books, Beast of the Bayou or Jumper Fall.
Welcome to Love Letters and Books, a podcast for anyone who loves a good story. This is a soft space to explore romance and books where no topic is too taboo. I'm your host, Casey, and this week I am sitting down with author CJ North. I recently picked up CJ's book, Beast of the Bayou, and fell in love with her writing. And while we started this interview talking about her books, we actually moved on to touching on some bigger topics, including acute versus chronic trauma, PTSD and intimacy, power dynamics and agency, living in survival mode, and finding hope even while stuck in oppressive systems. It was such a beautiful conversation, and I'm so glad that we had time to talk about these relatable, hurting, and sometimes messy characters who are still worthy of love exactly as they are. Also, make sure to stay to the end so you can hear CJ's love letter to the book community. CJ, welcome to the Love Letters and Books podcast. I am so glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me.
I was really excited to talk to you for a few reasons, which I will list now, and I'm sure none of it will make you uncomfortable as we start this interview. So one thing I have shared with you before is I think you're the funniest person on Threads. So every day when I open that app, I literally look for your posts because you crack me up. But two, because I saw you on Threads, I heard about your book, Beast of the Bayou, and picked it up, devoured it, and could not wait to talk to you about it. And I love that. I love when I come across a writer who's completely new to me and I just fall in love with their voice. So yeah, that's not an awkward way to start the interview, just throwing compliments at you. I'm really glad you're here because I do want to talk about your writing, and I also want to talk about books of yours that I haven't read. So yeah, welcome to the podcast. Are you up for this conversation?
I am much better this time.
Should we share that with the audience that we did a whole episode the last time and we're re-recording this episode? Listen, I have better lighting this time, to be honest. So I think this episode will be the one that hits the air.
I don't mind sharing that I was completely just off my rocker that day, and I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing. This is crashing and burning, and I feel terrible for wasting your time.
No, not at all. And if you're okay to talk about it, let's talk about it. You know, you and I think, are putting a lot of pressure on ourselves because we're working around schedules, family lives, and trying to fit in this conversation where we're talking about creativity and world building and characters. And I think it's a lot to expect of people. And so any opportunity where I can introduce grace into a situation, I think is a really good lesson for me. That's not something I shy away from. You did not waste my time at all. I love talking to you. So we could do this every week and just keep messing up the episode and just chit chat all the time. I thought it was great. And I was really, I guess, inspired by you that you were brave enough to say, no, I'd like to do it again. And I'd like to come back. And I feel like that's a really good lesson for anyone listening, but also for me.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm really glad that you threw that out there too, because I was like, oh no, is this just not even going to be editable? This is just going to be, oh, this is just a trash interview. It's going to be 2 minutes long because that's the only thing we can get.
Well, isn't that interesting? Because there's a parallel there with writing as well. When we
definitely.
are being creative, right? And we're thinking like, oh my God, what did I just put down on the page? Can I even use any of this? Or you write like 20,000 words and you're like, yeah, I'm going to keep 1,000. And
You're
I
right.
feel like that's something that a lot of people can relate to. So while it feels atrocious for us when we're in the moment, it's just real life. And it's actually not that big of a deal. So all that to say, I'm glad that you are back here. And I would like to just begin at the beginning. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to becoming a writer?
Well, I live in Ice Hell, better known as Alaska. And I started writing just a few years ago. I was working from home full time with my little one. He was still an infant. And I decided I don't need sleep. I don't sleep anyway. What am I doing with my time? So I started writing stories, and it just kind of snowballed from there. And I was like, okay, I think I have a full book here. I'm going to see what it takes to publish it. And then I published a book right after that, too.
Well, what I love most when I speak to you is just how effortless and casual you make things sound. But for the audience who may not know some of the background details, you published your book Jumper Fall in August of 2025, and then you published Beast of the Bayou in September 2025. So this is all fairly new, and they were pretty much back to back. And I want to know, just take me to that moment, the moment before you hit publish on your first book. What were the thoughts going through your head?
Oh, just it kind of like how I felt about the first interview. I was like, this is going to be a disaster. This isn't going to be good. It was also kind of like, oh, someone's actually going to read it. And also, oh no, someone's actually going to read it. So it's kind of that I want to have something out there, but I don't want to know what you think about it sometimes because it's a little, it's a bit vulnerable when you put out your art like that.
I can definitely relate to that. I'm sure a lot of people listening can as well. It's that desire to share stories, spread a message, be creative, and then also wanting to almost run away immediately. And maybe that's a healthy space to be in, that little tension. So now that the books have been out for a little bit and you have people like me banging on your door, asking to talk to you all the time and reading your book and loving your writing and curious about what you're doing next, what has that felt like for you to actually receive the attention, the feedback, knowing that people are reading your books? What's that like?
It's definitely quite surreal. You just think, really? And also, I have a lot of just kind of confidence issues in general. So I'm like, no, I can't take a compliment. This is trash. I don't know why you think it's okay.
What's wrong with
But
you for liking my book?
yeah, it's like I produce nothing good. I don't know why you like it. But I don't always think terribly of myself like that. But there's always the imposter syndrome. You just always like, really? I don't know so much, but I'm glad you liked it. I'm glad you had fun with it.
Exactly, right? And I think a lot of us can feel that way in different areas of our lives. So I do like when it comes up on the podcast because it's really human and we shouldn't pathologize it or beat ourselves up over it. Maybe it's just a process that we all go through. Well, I was not quiet about how much I love Beast of the Bayou. I think I even commented, I opened the book and read the first 2 sentences and I was already posting about it on Threads. Let's dive in and talk a little bit about this book. So, for the listening audience who may not have read it, can you give us a little synopsis?
So it's a loose retelling of Beauty and the Beast, and it takes place in Louisiana. I kind of wanted to put a little bit of a twist on it because I just kind of get a little bit sick of retellings of Beauty and the Beast where she's whisked away to a big palace and she's pampered by servants, and Beast is just kind of off in a corner being broody, and I don't like that as much. I want him to grovel and do all the work and take care of her. So that's kind of the mentality there. And it's also kind of a little bit Tarzan-esque. It's kind of wild man kind of thought there. Yeah, I got a little on a tangent there. I apologize.
No, I love it. I want to unpack a little bit about what you just said and then we'll keep going, but I love that twist where they don't have the resources. It's not some magical palace, but it is still the connection and a little bit of the framework of that story because our main male character had to express himself in different ways and he was very creative in the bayou. So,
Yes. So I wanted to also set it in Louisiana because I've always loved kind of the creepy bayou aspect, and it's also wanted to keep it in its French roots as the story is French originally. And so I know a little bit about kind of Acadiana, the Cajun French culture and everything like that. So I thought it'd be really fun to put it in that kind of setting.
well, I loved the setting, and I was actually very surprised when I was learning more about you and learning about your lore and the fact that you're in Alaska. And I was just surprised that the setting you chose, but also I loved it because it built this very isolated world for these two characters in which they had to survive, but also connect and thrive in a lot of ways, I felt throughout the story. So, can you tell us about our FMC? Because I loved her, but I also loved the way you wrote her.
Mag, or Magdalena, she is our main female character. She is burnt out at her job as a baker. She's just carrying all the slack. And her best friend, Jessa, is just constantly hounding her to go out to this haunted house in the middle of nowhere in the swamp to spend the night because there's tales of ghosts and people going missing. And it's just, she sees it as an opportunity to get her away and to just kind of unplug from her stressful life as a baker. And when Mag gets there, she figures out pretty early on. At first, she's just kind of like, oh, okay, it's just a creepy old house. But as she gets closer to it, she can even sense in the air that there's something off about this place, and she does not want to be there. But then she finds out they're stuck because they would be having to drive back in the boat in the dark, and her friend doesn't want to do that. So they are stuck spending the night. And of course, during the night, she has a nightmare about our main male character. And she wakes up in the dead of the night and finds out he is all too real because he is there and he is taking her to his shack.
Well, I love the paranormal elements to the story. I just feel like it really, without giving too much away, it just really amplified it. And again, built this wild world that these two almost seem stuck in. But I think one of the things I loved most about Mag in this situation is she's trying to figure everything out, right? She's just trying to use what she's got to save herself, get out of this. Like, what does she actually want to do? And I think it's so beautiful between the connection between them that sort of shifts throughout the story. And this time that they're spending together is actually an opportunity for her to learn a little bit more about herself, but then also to connect with your main male character, whom I absolutely adore, our short, resourceful king, who he has a million love languages, all of which I genuinely appreciate. So can you tell us a little bit about him?
Our curse man, Henri, is desperate to break the curse that keeps him immortal and mute, and he's been there for about 200 years, you find out. To break the curse, he has to make someone fall in love with him. And so the only way he can do that, being stuck out in the middle of nowhere like that, is to try to force somebody to love him. So that's kind of what he does. He finds pretty girls and he says, nope, you're mine now. And now I'm going to take care of every single little thing for you until you love me or you die.
And I'm sure the audience listening finds that totally unattractive. No, but this man turns the world upside down in order to really speak the love language of the person who's with him. And so one of the things that was so beautiful is that he's very much tailoring things to Mag, our main female character. It's not like he's doing the same exact things he's done with everyone else. He's really paying attention to her and saying in quotes, what can I do to make this person love me? And man, does he just check everything off the list. He really goes above and beyond. So one of the things I loved about your writing was that there was so much nuance. He was paying so much attention to the details of her and what she likes and what she needs in those moments. Just such a beautiful story in that way, and really, really fun for the reader. But what was it like to be the writer and to take the story in that direction where, this guy isn't showing up with a bouquet of flowers. He's doing intense acts of service to win her love.
I think we need to show a lot of times more practical ways that we can show people that we care and that we want them to be happy and be taken care of. So Mag has long, wavy, curly hair. And so that's a hard thing to take care of when you have just bar soap and swamp water. So he pays attention to that and that he can see that she's struggling. And so he is resourceful and he makes it his mission to find something like olive oil something that would be very hard to find, and just comb her hair for her, help take care of that for her. And
I
he
love
just,
that scene in the book, by the way.
I do too. It's something that I probably wouldn't want in real life. Like, God, don't touch my hair. Like, nobody touch my hair.
Oh, no, but in
But
that setting, it was so nurturing and it was just so sweet and loving. And then a stark contrast to the life she's actually been living. You know, her life before this, it's just the complete opposite where people are almost asking too much of her and demanding too much of her time and energy. And here's someone saying, like, oh no, sit there. I've got it. And
yep,
it's just really sweet and beautiful. And I loved this book and their story, even, you know, sort of how you wrap it up. I don't want to give anything away, but I really love the ending too. Just the journey you took us on with these two. I think it's really powerful how you can world build and that world continues no matter where they are. So just really stunning writing. But the funniest part about this was the book, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but this wasn't your main goal. You wrote Jump or Fall, and that was your passion. And then this is the book you put out afterward.
yeah. This was kind of a gap story, so it was something I was putting together while I was waiting for like beta reader feedback on Jump or Fall, or if I just needed to let recent edits just kind of simmer for a week or two, then I'd work on this. And then it turned into the thing that everyone likes more.
I just love how you're so casual. You're like, you know, this hit book that I wrote, that was just something I did in the meantime while I was waiting for everything else.
It's just
Oh, I think there's something to be, you know, there's a lesson there as well for all of us listening that, you know, everything's grist for the mill and we never know what we're doing and how that will be received and perceived by others. But let's take a moment and shift to that book, Jump or Fall. And I feel like we're at a really interesting intersection here because I didn't start with that book, right? I was introduced to you through Beast of the Bayou. I love your writing and would immediately go and pick up this other book that you wrote. Tell us about it. What are some of the similarities and what are some of the differences?
so I'd say kind of the main similarities is I just can't resist writing simpy male characters. They just are obsessed and adore the FMC. I can't write a bully to save my life.
Love it.
So that's the main similarity is the men are always very attentive and caring, and they always try to do whatever they can for the FMC. So for Jump or Fall, it's a dark dystopian romance, and it leans more into the kind of cyberpunk and sci-fi realm of dystopian fiction. The characters live in a walled city-state called Tychus, and travel to and from it is very heavily restricted. So the people are essentially trapped in there under kind of a horrible police state, basically, where there's heavy surveillance. It's a futuristic city. It has an official head of state, but the secret police, called the Silvers, they essentially run everything. They have an intense network of spies to keep everyone in line and always suspicious and not trusting anybody. So think kind of like KGB in the USSR. The higher ranking officials, like the main antagonist, all have cybernetic claws implanted in their fingertips that they use to intimidate and to actually hurt people with. The city has a system of enforcing laws through scarification. The marks are called stripes because the pattern created across the back, shoulders, and back of the arms resembles a tiger. So there's kind of like an animal parallel there. There's so much going on in that world. It's a think kind of like a sci-fi Game of Thrones almost because there's just so much going on. But to give an idea of just kind of how suffocating the place is, it's very technologically advanced, and they have like a medical healing serum called Medispray that can instantly heal shallow wounds and not leave scars. And so they've become extremely vain and superficial. And even the mirrors, when you look in a mirror, it will analyze your face and recommend products for you. So that's kind of what's going on there. Also, a scar to your face is just instant banishment. It started out as a way to identify the criminals and people you can't trust, but it quickly became anybody with a scar on your face, you have to go and live in a slum called Division 8, and that's the only place you can live.
Well, total side note. this has nothing to do with your book, and we will get to it, but I just want to point out, like 20 years ago, I worked in advertising in New York, and I remember a sales guy giving me a whole speech about how the coolest thing on earth would be if we had cameras in advertisements and we could scan people's faces and then immediately pitch advertisements towards them for what we thought was wrong with them. And I was like, yeah, that's the coolest. That really wouldn't be terrifying at all. So I just, sorry, as you're describing the book, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that dystopian experience of working on Madison Avenue. So anyway, now to come back to your book, I love that you're setting us up in this world, and sort of a sci-fi Game of Thrones is a really interesting way to approach it. And one of the themes in that book was, in all of those books, which I read, by the way, because it's a very nerdy phase a while ago, but that everything is not what it seems. And that was something that is woven throughout those stories. And I'm wondering, when you're looking at your main characters in Jumper Fall, is there anything about them that would not be what it seems or is intriguing to us? Can you tell us a little bit about them?
Well, Mara, the FMC, to anybody else looking at her, she's a very successful woman. She works as the master tailor, making high-end, high-tech armor for the police force and for any of the elite in the city that want like armor. Think like John Wick. Have you seen John Wick?
Yes.
And he goes and he gets that fancy suit. It's kind of like that. That was part of my inspiration for Hyperion. So it looks on the outside like everything would be okay, unless you know a little bit more about her situation, where she's essentially captive to the leader of the Silvers, and she has zero freedom. She lives in her own apartment, but that's after a decade of being tormented by this guy. So,
Okay, so a lot more than meets the eye. That's really
yes.
interesting. And what about our main male character? What about him? What makes him tick?
Well, for him, it's more he has nothing to lose anymore because he has tried living in another place and it didn't go well. He is only allowed to live in Division 8 because he has a scar on his face. And he's also very, very tech savvy. They joke in the book that he can hack into anything with a power source, and he tries to. He can get into anything almost. He's definitely a depressive character. He's very lonely, and when he meets Mara, he finally sees somebody that kind of reflects back at him what he feels.
And what do you think is the foundation of the connection between them? Like, how would you describe their relationship?
They can see in each other their shared pain, essentially. They're both very heavily traumatized people, and they both think that they're unworthy of finding somebody. And as the story goes on, they figure out like, oh, maybe this can work. I can actually put myself out there and I won't have to be alone forever.
What do you think it is about the dystopian setting, which honestly, more and more feels like the current setting of our lives, but we can get into that
Yes.
later if you'd like. But what do you think it is about that that raises the stakes, or, is almost creates its own background character for the story, right? Where there's so much going on, there's so much tension. The stakes are really high, or that there's consequences. Like, how does that change how people make decisions, how they show up, how they connect? How does it change a love story, right? I mean, when you think about it, if you have nothing left to lose, that's a very particular story. And what are you ready to do if you have nothing left to lose?
Yeah, they definitely they go into it knowing that this could just be it. I'm probably going to die in some horrific way if I get caught. They both recognize that. And as they come together and realize, oh, I really care about this person. I don't even like saying goodbye to them. This is weird. Well, now I really don't want them to die. So I'm going to try to take care of them too and look after them. And then also, well, now I know that they care about me. So maybe I won't be so crazy in how I acted.
Yeah, no, that it shifts their own perspective of how they're moving through the world.
There's at one point when they finally do come together because, it's romance. Spoiler alert, they end up together. But they have a discussion once they finally open up about their feelings of Gordon wants to leave. He wants to abandon the mission because he's working for an outside interest that has hired him to come and try to take down the elites in the city. But now that he has Mara and he really cares about her and wants to get her away, he says, you know what? F this mission. I want to just escape with you. We can live in a different city. We can live on the road. I just don't want to be here. I want you away from here. And she turns that down because she has her own reasons for wanting to take down the main guy, especially. So it kind of shifts their motives. Like originally, he's bent on hatred and revenge, and then he gets her, and so he changes his tune a bit, and it's like, you know what? I don't need revenge as much as I need you.
Oh, I love that. I actually feel like that's a really powerful and transformative thing to weave into a story where someone's outlook or how they saw themselves or what their purpose was shifts. So that's really beautiful. Do you feel that you will continue to write in this direction of jump or fall? Like, what is the writing style that you see yourself moving forward with?
Well, I do have more stories set in this world to continue it. So at the end, there's a bit of a resolution to their mission and everything that they were trying to do. And the character arc for those two, it comes together and they have their happily ever after. But there's more that happens afterwards because in the real world, when you free a place that's been kept under a horribly oppressive regime and you just open the floodgates and now everybody can go wherever they want. And there's all these horribly traumatized people and they've been secluded in this place. They don't know much about the outside world anymore. And now there's going to be a humanitarian crisis. So that kind of goes into the second book and the characters that get put into that situation where they're trying to help with that.
Oh, CJ, I'm so excited. I need to dive into this book because I feel like this is a world that I need to dive into. And I love how you're following what would almost be a natural progression in that way. And even shifting from that to the humanitarian crisis is incredible. And I also don't want to overlook what's happening in the world today and how that informs culture, art, writing, and our perception of it, right? You know, when we're reading books and there are parallel things going on in the world, like, is it that much more impactful or do we deny that it's happening? Like, I guess, how do we as readers experience that? But then also, how do you as a writer experience that? Like, you know, what about what's going on in the world today inspires you to write a book about these types of struggles that people are going through and the crises that follow them?
Yeah, and also just the people pulling the strings who they don't really have any allegiance but to themselves and to keeping power and to making money. And that's very present in the story. And even the people who hired Gordon, they were complicit in everything that was going on there. And it was only once the antagonist, Dawson, became too much of a headache for them because of his business dealings. And so they decided, you know what, we don't need you anymore. So they go against him finally, even though they've been complicit in everything that he's been doing and torturing people and being horrible. So that's very close to what happens in the real world. There are so many people who are just complicit in awful things because it's what's advantageous. Sometimes you don't know what it would look like if it changed. And so they just kind of decide to keep the status quo because it's too dangerous to not know what the future would hold. I also borrowed a lot from like accounts from North Korean defectors who escaped from North Korea. And so that's a lot of inspiration that I got for Gordon because he escapes in the past and then he comes back when he's hired to take them down. But he realizes when he's out there that he doesn't know much about anything outside of what he knows in his city. And also, since the city he goes to is very close to Tychus, they don't like dealing with people that are from there because they think they're slow. They think they don't know anything. They think they get everything from a handout. And a lot of times they'll have a disfiguring scar as well. So they can kind of pick on them for that because everyone's very superficial.
Well, I love that you've gone so deep into the themes, the story, and the characters. And one thing that comes up for me, I guess, even in real life right now, but also when I'm reading these kinds of books is the concept of hope. And where does that go in these crazy times when it's in a dystopian setting or it's real life United States today? Like the concept of hope and connection and love. How does that come through in your story?
I think I would just like to show that it can be possible no matter what circumstances you're in, and you can always find somebody for you, essentially, and that you are worthy of love no matter what you've experienced before. And even if you're not fixed, which I hate that kind of application to people who've experienced trauma, especially. You don't have to wait until you've reached a certain benchmark of healing to be worthy of someone loving you.
Well, I like that we're talking about this because that's actually been a very harmful concept that has been woven through pop psychology and social media and some of our parents and
Mm-hmm.
just, the world around us. Trauma and this idea of being quote unquote fixed or being healed, and what a misconception it is. And so I feel like you're taking on quite a bit as a writer when you are maybe pushing back against that gently and saying, that's not how this story is going to go. And there can be some disappointment in there, right? For someone who's had it pounded in their head that you have to be completely fixed and on your own and isolated until you can present yourself to someone in this shiny new fixed version versus showing up in your wholeness. And once you've experienced some of these things, it will be part of you. It's part of your story. It's not the only part of your story, but it is part of it. So I don't know. I guess my question for you is when you're sitting down to write a story like that and you're taking a different approach to it, what goes into that for you? Because you could write the story where they just fix themselves and get back together when they're, superheroes. But the story of people coming together with all of their many parts and fitting together and loving each other. It's pretty brave to write a story about people who have experienced significant trauma. And you're not making them a caricature of themselves. You're actually trying to drop into the vulnerability, the tenderness, the reality of trauma is that we're not going to just get rid of it one day. It's not like we can just wipe it off of us one day when we've cracked the code and we've figured it all out and then it'll just be gone. I say this as a deeply traumatized person that it does not go away. And I am not deserving of love and connection and grace only when I get rid of that part of myself. Like that's not when I'm deserving of those things. Like as a human being, I'm deserving of those things. And if this is part of my story, I can't just like shelve that part of myself and then show up in a relationship. So you're writing these characters, right? You're making the choice to write about their experiences and them falling in love and making decisions and figuring out how they want to live their lives through this. So I don't know, take me through your process and maybe some of the things you were thinking about as you're writing this very specific type of love story that people are going to react to. There's a lot of traumatized people out there and they're reading your
Yes.
books and they're going to see themselves in the character or be confronted by something that the character does. So what goes into that for you?
So it definitely pulled from my own experiences a lot with trauma and healing and all of that, and what that really looks like and what it means, and that there is no finish line, essentially. It's a continuous marathon that you will go through for your entire life for the most part. And I really wanted to write a couple where they understood what it meant to not be able to sleep, to wake up with nightmares, to not be able to always identify when there's an issue. So that's a big thing that I notice gets missed sometimes when people write characters with trauma, is they'll just kind of say it that, oh, they're having a panic attack. They won't essentially show that. And especially when it's the character themselves, you don't always recognize what's going on. You just realize, why is my heart beating so fast? Why can I not stand to be in this room anymore? Why do I want to crawl under a bed? So it's like the difference between kind of showing and telling. And I definitely put a lot of myself in these characters. And I wanted to also show kind of the different types of PTSD, especially. So the short, like kind of acute trauma where it's one incident. And so that's Gordon. And that's when he has his face cut. And so he has an intense fear of blades and he has frequent nightmares. He uses alcohol as a crutch to fall asleep. He has a really hard time opening up with anybody because of that. And he also just has low self-worth because he feels ugly. He's grown up in this very superficial society. So he can't believe that anybody would find him attractive like that either. And for Mara, I wanted to also show how long-term trauma can affect somebody. So she has kind of this, I even use the word disconnect a lot when she is kind of going through her episode, essentially, whenever she's intimate. So there's the disconnect of she has the desire for Gordon, but then her mind can't stay in place and then her body also doesn't respond. So there's just like a triple disconnect going on and she can't really place what's going on with it. And she deals with a lot of that kind of self-worth issues as well. She's like, I can't even like sleep with somebody in a normal way.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really powerful that you chose to highlight that in a story because it's very much the unseen part of trauma or the thing that should just be should quote unquote like wiped under the rug. It's interesting the timing of this recording because for my real daytime job, we just did an episode about the aftermath of trauma and PTSD and sort of the unseen part of it, meaning, oh, you have to live the rest of your life and show up in relationships and be a person who moves through the world. And how do you show up in those relationships? And yes, the trauma has ended, the acute experience is over, but then you have the chronic experience of living as a human being who feels this in your body, in your mind, in your spirit. And how do you show up in the world that way? So I just think it's interesting that we're talking about this after that just came out. And I think that I love stories that shine a light on what gets missed when something gets thrown around in media. Like the word trauma has been thrown around so much the last 20 years and everyone's different perspectives about it. But this is the quiet part that happens afterwards. And it's interesting the fact that you're sort of differentiating between acute and complex chronic trauma because yeah, it does have a little bit of a different effect and it's interesting to talk about. And instead of lumping them all together, you know, sometimes with the complex trauma, there's almost you have to survive, right? Sorry if I'm getting like too deep or weird right now, but like, are you okay if we
Nope,
talk about this? Okay, great. So we have to survive. You have to you have to live, whether you're a child when it happens, a teenager, an adult, you have to get through the day. And sometimes our brains can reorganize and internalize things in a way that will allow us to survive, but prevent us from thriving. So when you're a child and you experience continuous trauma, part of the way kids navigate that is saying, well, there must be something wrong with me. Because if there's something wrong with you and you're the person responsible for my safety and livelihood, I will not survive. So I have to tell myself that there's something wrong with me, that this is happening. And that's how I'll get through it. Because if I can just continue to edit myself or hurt myself or, you know, take things away from myself or punish myself, then I can get through it. And it's this cycle that can be very, very, very challenging to unwind. And then when it happens as an adult and you're going through these chronic traumatic conditions, you know, how do we have to adjust just to get through the day? And I really appreciate that you're taking a look at this, not in like love comes along and we fall in love and everything's okay. Because sometimes I feel like when love comes along, it almost allows a lot to rise to the surface because we have to show up in this way. And you know, being intimate with someone is a really powerful experience of navigating all the things that have happened to us. So I love that you're almost highlighting that experience of like, I should, right? The quotes, I should be okay in this moment. And this is the moment when everything's rising to the surface. And I just think that that's brilliant, beautiful, and much needed writing. And I think it takes a lot of sensitivity to do. So, you said you didn't like compliments, so I'm sure you are dying right now, but I just really appreciate that you're writing about this in the way that you are.
Thank you. I also try to, because there are a couple of different kind of flashback chapters throughout, and so you kind of get to see the journey through their eyes as these things are happening, because by the time the story starts, Mara's been a captive for 10 years. And so she's just kind of in her own kind of status quo, essentially. But when you get to the flashback of chapters, you get to just see her terror and also how she tries to figure out the best way to cope with where her new situation is. And she has to decide very early on, like the very next morning after she's taken, she's contemplating throwing herself down the stairs. So there's that. And then also she ends up throwing herself into her work. And so that's her only outlet. So that's kind of her main coping mechanism there, I guess. Sorry, I kind of
No, but that's
it.
really interesting. No, but that's really interesting too, because you bring up him wanting to leave, and yes, there's also like, hey, we have our own agendas, but it's also like stepping away from the coping mechanisms that is incredibly scary, and it's a big ask. So I love that we're talking about all of this, and I cannot wait to read this book and enter into this world that you're building, because I also feel like it's a really safe space for the reader to read about these topics, but in a way where it's handled with care and intention. And I just really appreciate that. I think sometimes it can be hard to read stories where it feels like a trope, and it's like, oh, well, that was a traumatic thing that redirected the entire course of my life, and I'm reading about it in a book, and it feels a little flippant. So I really like when there's a lot of care put into it, and it can be hard and gritty and really challenging, but the intention behind it. So
I definitely wanted to try to balance both of those things, and I hope I did. But when I read it, I think I did all right. But I wanted to show a progression of both of them healing together in a way. But by the time the story ends, there's no happy like resolution that now they're fixed or anything. They still are going to have issues, and they've kind of just accepted that, and they're going to work together through it. But I still wanted to have that kind of hope angle with it as well, that yeah, you might still struggle, but you can still have love and be satisfied with life, essentially, even if you're going to struggle.
And that's a really powerful story. And I think that it kind of hits a different part of us. It's almost like that, you know it in your bones, that that's a true story. And like I said, I'm just glad that you're taking up the space and writing these stories.
Thank you.
CJ, I'm so glad that we've had the time to sit down today and really go in depth with these stories, because I feel like there are so many powerful themes that you're weaving through them. But my question is, what are some themes or tropes that you're really interested in writing about, or ones that you love to read yourself?
So definitely my favorite trope ever, and I didn't even know it was a thing until probably last year, is transactional or quid pro quo. It's like this for that kind of dynamics, because it's a way to flip it on its head. This idea of starting off with the emotional intimacy and then working up to the physical. I like seeing how people who are having to be intimate physically for whatever reason, usually because they've made a deal together, and then slowly start to build up their relationship afterwards. And I also like it when a woman is using sex instead of the man using it against her, essentially. So kind of that kind of power switch, I guess.
Oh, interesting. I love that. I sort of love the take, obviously, in our conversation, you're already seeing. I love when we kind of push back on the assumptions. And is there a character of yours that you have written, or one that's about to come out, who you feel really pushes back against those assumptions and switches the power dynamic?
I have a book that I'm not quite finished with yet. I'm almost done with the first draft. It's called What's Beneath, and it's a post-apocalyptic, like after a disease has wiped out most of the planet, and we're pretty much just set back to being primal humans, essentially. So there's a lot of violence, there's a lot of horrible stuff going on. So the world population has collapsed from a mass pandemic. In this book, What's Beneath, the FMC Nyx has been surviving with her sister Sky in a remote cabin by a lake for the past 7 or so years. Her sister has hypothyroidism, so she has a very tenuous grasp on her health because all of the meds by then are expired, and they're now having her survive on freeze-dried animal thyroids, which is a thing I learned about, which is pretty neat. She has an agreement going with the proper settlement that's nearby, where she essentially trades sex for this powdered thyroid to keep her sister alive, and her sister has no idea about it. So she has an agreement going with the man from the only real settlement nearby. It's a place where the wealthy at the beginning of the pandemic decided to build up and put together, kind of like in The Walking Dead when they have that big Alexandria. I think they called it Alexandria. And yeah, so it's kind of like that. And they've got everything very dialed in, but they're not allowed to go live there because reasons. So Sky doesn't know that she's doing this. And one day when she's supposed to go and trade with this man for the dried thyroids, he doesn't show up. And then they both get captured. And they quickly find out that this settlement was invaded by a very violent and calculating new group who had been scoping them out for weeks and just took everything. And now Nyx and her sister are claimed as companions by one of the mysterious men who doesn't speak much, and he wears a mask, and he has bones hanging from his ceiling in his house. Well, he gives her the option. He'll let them go. He's not going to keep them there if they don't want to be there. But if she's going to stay, then he wants her to be available to him, essentially. And she has to convince him to keep making this thyroid extract. And so that's essentially why she decides to stay there with her sister, is to keep her alive.
What is the name of this book? I feel like you said it. Now I'm like, I need to write this down so that I can read it when it comes out.
It's called What's Beneath.
Oh, interesting. And when do you, I feel like I'm rushing you because I think you just said you finished. So what's the time frame for this new favorite book of mine that's going to be coming out?
I'm aiming to publish this one sometime in the summer. That's my main goal. If it's not the summer, then fall, but definitely this year.
Oh, so exciting. Oh, CJ, I love that we've talked about so many things. Every time you've said dystopian or post-apocalyptic, I've been like, yeah, it's about right. It really, there's a lot of alignment with what's going on. So now I'm going to pivot because we have come to the part of the episode that is all you. I invite all of my guests to write and read a love letter, either to their younger selves or to their readers. And I would just like to give you the floor to share your love letter.
Well, thank you, Casey. So my love letter is kind of expanding this beyond just readers. This is a love letter to the book community, to readers, authors, and everyone working in between. To readers, thank you for giving newer authors like myself a chance. It still blows my mind that stories bouncing around in my head have become something you actually want to delve into. I don't think the imposter syndrome will ever go away, but your lovely messages and willingness to spread the word about my books have meant more than I can say. To other authors, thank you for being so supportive. Writing and publishing can be very lonely, especially when so much time is spent inside your own head. Connecting with writers from all over the world who share a passion for storytelling has been invaluable. To everyone working in between, thank you for creating and maintaining the spaces that make these connections possible. It's easy to get lost in algorithm woes, but places like this are a reminder that real human connection is still happening. We can connect beyond perfectly curated hooks and keywords and share our love of books. Is that okay?
Oh yes. I love that you imagine that something you wrote would not be okay, seeing as how I invited you here because I love your writing. So no, it's absolutely okay. And I really, really appreciate you writing and sharing that and taking the time to join me on here. I know that it's hard to just jump in and start talking about your books, but you have an audience that's really excited about the things that you're writing and working on. And I'm really glad you're here, and I can't wait until you come back and we talk about your next book. And I just think it's going to be really great. So, CJ, for anyone listening, I'm going to put all of your social media links in the show notes, but where do you like to live and be contacted? Like, what is the platform that you like the most?
Oh, definitely Instagram. TikTok's kind of my place where I just throw spaghetti at the wall for everything. Instagram is more of my home.
Okay. Well, I will make sure to include that in the show notes. And I just want to say thank you for being here today. And for anyone listening, Beast of the Bayou was the book that I picked up that I absolutely loved. And Jumper Fall was the first book that CJ wrote. So, CJ, thank you.
Thank you, Casey.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Love Letters and Books, a podcast for anyone who loves a good story. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to follow, rate, and review this podcast on your favorite listening platform. You can find me on both Instagram and TikTok at Love Letters and Books. And if you're interested in being a guest on Love Letters and Books, suggesting your favorite author, or just want to write in an original love letter to yourself or someone else to be read on air, please send me an email at lovelettersandbookspodcast@gmail.com.